The world around me shifted suddenly, and I found myself in a cold, damp cell. The walls seemed to close in with each breath, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and despair. The iron bars in front of me were solid, and in the distance I heard the muffled cries of others, a chorus of hopelessness that reverberated down the dark, endless corridors. I didn't know how I had arrived here. One moment I had been asleep, and the next I was in a prison that seemed pulled out of a twisted version of reality, a parallel universe that was a distorted reflection of everything familiar. I struggled to make sense of the space around me. A massive figure, almost humanoid but with a mechanical glow, stood guard outside, emotionless and unmoving. He shoved me roughly inside the cell, locking the door with a clang that seemed to echo forever. The light above me was dim, and I watched as the last rays of something resembling sunlight faded through a narrow window. Time seemed to twist here, sometimes stretching on endlessly, other times snapping by in an instant. Days became weeks, or at least that's what it felt like. I was utterly alone, and that isolation began gnawing at my sanity. My thoughts turned inward, and the memories that surfaced were far from comforting. I thought of the mistakes I had made, the people I had wronged, and every failure I'd lived through. It was as though the walls themselves fed on my regrets, amplifying them until they were all I could see, all I could feel. This place wasn't just a prison, it was a twisted reflection of every fear I had ever had. It wanted to break me, and the worst part was that it was succeeding. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the heavy door creak open again. A figure was thrown inside, collapsing onto the cold stone floor beside me. I rushed over, turning him to face me, and I saw eyes that mirrored my own, haunted, lost, and desperate. He introduced himself as Elias. He, too, had woken up here with no explanation, no crime, and no escape. Elias's presence shattered the silence I had grown accustomed to, and for the first time I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. In this place, designed to break us through isolation, there was suddenly someone else, someone who could share the burden of fear. We began to talk, hesitantly at first and then more freely, as though letting out our secrets would somehow lighten the crushing weight we both carried. Elias told me about his daughter. The words were heavy as they left his lips, each one drenched in sorrow. He had lost her, his light, his everything. It had been an accident, one that he never forgave himself for. And in this prison they made him watch it over and over, every single day, every single moment. They took his worst memory and played it on repeat, turning his mind into a loop of pain and regret. His voice broke as he spoke, tears rolling down his weathered face. In his pain I saw my own fears reflected back at me, of loss, of failure, of being powerless to protect those we love. Days turned into weeks, and I lost count of time. Elias and I clung to each other's stories, finding comfort in shared pain. We were two strangers, but in our vulnerability we forged a bond that was stronger than anything this place could tear apart. We spoke of the past, of regrets, of the people we loved but had failed. And as we spoke, the prison seemed to fight back. Our memories became nightmares, vivid and tangible, pulling us into the darkest moments of our lives. One night, as we huddled together in the cold cell, the door opened again and another figure was pushed inside. It was a young woman, her eyes hollow, her face gaunt. Her name was Leah. She looked like she had been here forever, her spirit almost entirely eroded by whatever horrors this place inflicted upon her. Yet, somewhere beneath the exhaustion there was a spark, a faint glimmer of resistance. Leah told us about the nature of this prison. She had been there longer than anyone else, years, decades she didn't even know anymore. She had watched countless others come and go, seen people broken and dragged away, never to return. She had tried to escape once, a long time ago, but had failed. and the prison had punished her by taking away the one thing she loved most, her freedom to remember. Her memories were fractured, pieces of her life scattered and lost, leaving behind only fragments of who she once was. We began to form a plan. It was desperate, but it was all we had. We knew that the guards weren't human, that they were machines programmed to follow orders. We had seen their routines, their movements, and we thought we saw patterns, flaws we could exploit. The night of the escape was the longest night of my life. Leah, Elias, and I moved through the dark corridors, our breaths held, our footsteps silent. Each creak of the floor seemed like a thunderclap, each moment a lifetime. As we neared what we believed to be the exit, a shimmering gateway flickering in and out of existence, Leah stopped. She looked at us, her face pale, tears welling in her eyes. She reached out, taking my hand and then Elias's. "I can't go with you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I tried to leave once before, and I failed, and they took everything from me. They took my memories, my family. I can't lose the little I have left. I have to stay." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Elias's eyes widened in shock, and I could see the pain in his expression, the disbelief. "No," he said, his voice trembling. "No, you can't stay. We're all getting out of here, together." Leah shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "If I try again and I fail, they'll take away what little I remember of my daughter. She's all I have left now, just fragments, just pieces. But it's enough to keep me going. You still have a chance. You can make it." I felt my heart shatter at her words. I'd seen the strength in Leah, seen her fight every single day just to hold on to herself, and now she was giving up her chance at freedom so that we could have ours. I wanted to argue, to drag her with us if I had to, but I knew she was right. She had made her choice. Leah smiled at us, a sad, broken smile. "You have to live," she said. "You have to remember me. Remember all of us who couldn't make it. Promise me you won't forget." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion, unable to speak. Elias hugged her, his body shaking with sobs. "We won't forget you," he whispered. "We promise." With that, Leah turned and walked back into the shadows, her figure disappearing into the darkness of the prison. I felt the tears streaming down my face, my heart aching with every step I took away from her. Elias and I reached the gateway, the shimmering light growing brighter as we approached. We stepped through together and everything went white. I woke up in my bed, my body drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The world around me was familiar, but it felt different, emptier. Elias was gone, Leah was gone, I was home, but part of me was still there in that cold, dark prison. I looked out the window at the world beyond, at the people walking by, oblivious to the battle I had just fought, and I realized something. We are all fighting our own battles, all struggling against the things that imprison us: fear, regret, loss. And sometimes the only way to survive is to hold on to each other, to share our stories, to remind each other that we are not alone. I knew I would carry Leah's memory with me for the rest of my life. Her sacrifice, her courage, her love, it was now my burden to bear, my promise to keep. And as I stood there looking out at the rising sun, I made a vow. I would live, not just for myself, but for all those who couldn't. For Leah, for Elias, for everyone still trapped in their own prisons. I would remember them, and I would fight for them, because no one should have to face their battles alone. And as long as I could still breathe, I would fight for freedom, for love, for the chance to truly live.